Lieutenant Curtis Hinkle, retired, sat in the corner booth of Romano's Italian restaurant at 7:45 p.m., his phone buzzing with an incoming text. At 53, he'd seen combat in 2 tours overseas, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. The text was from his wife, Amber. "Car stuck in parking garage, won't start. Love you, might be late getting home." Curtis stared at the message, his military-trained instincts immediately sensing something wrong. Amber's silver Lexus SUV was parked 2 tables away from him in the restaurant lot. He could see it through the window, but that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the woman sitting 2 tables away, laughing intimately with a man Curtis had never seen before. The woman with auburn hair wearing the blue dress Amber had bought last month. The woman who was supposed to be stuck in a parking garage somewhere across San Jose. His wife, Amber Hinkle. 41 years old, senior cybersecurity analyst at TechShield VPN Solutions. The woman he'd married 9 years ago after retiring from the Army. Curtis watched as the man leaned across the table and kissed Amber. Not a friendly peck. A deep, passionate kiss that spoke of familiarity and intimacy. Amber's hand moved to the man's cheek, caressing it tenderly. The same hand that wore Curtis's grandmother's wedding ring. 9 years. 9 years of marriage, of trust, of building what Curtis thought was a solid partnership. He'd left the military for Amber, settled in San Jose to be near her family, supported her career advancement at TechShield, and now he was watching her kiss another man while lying about her whereabouts. Curtis didn't move from his booth, didn't call out or make a scene. 25 years in the Army had taught him patience, strategy, and the importance of gathering intelligence before engaging the enemy. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began taking photos. The angles were perfect from his position. Amber and her lover holding hands across the table. Amber laughing at something he said. The kiss, all documented with timestamps and location data. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Amber. Called roadside assistance. This might take a while, don't wait up. Curtis typed back, no problem, hope they get you sorted soon, love you too. The irony of those last 3 words burned in his throat. Lieutenant Curtis Hinkle had built his military career on discipline, tactical planning, and never showing emotion under pressure. As he sat in that restaurant booth watching his wife betray their marriage, he applied every lesson he'd learned in 2 decades of service. Know your enemy. Gather intelligence. Plan your operation, execute with precision, and never ever let them see you coming. Curtis had met Amber Rollins 9 years ago at a veterans charity event in San Jose. She'd been volunteering, helping organize the fundraiser for wounded soldiers. Curtis, freshly retired from the Army after 25 years of service, had been one of the honored guests. At 44, he'd just accepted a consulting position with a defense contractor, translating his military logistics experience into the private sector. Amber had been 32 then, beautiful and vivacious with a sharp mind that worked in network security. She'd been fascinated by his military stories, and Curtis had been captivated by her intelligence and warmth. They'd married after a whirlwind 18-month courtship, and Curtis had thought he'd found his forever person. Now, watching her kiss another man, Curtis realized he'd been played like a fool. He stayed in his booth for another hour, documenting everything. At 9:15 p.m., Amber and her lover finally stood to leave. The man paid the check. Curtis noted he used a black American Express card, and they walked out together, hands intertwined. Curtis waited until they drove off in separate cars before leaving himself. At home, Curtis found their 8-year-old golden retriever, Harvey, waiting at the door. The house was empty and quiet. Too quiet. Curtis poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, his first drink in 3 months, and sat in his home office reviewing the photos he'd taken. His phone buzzed at 10:30 p.m. Finally home. Car drama took forever. Heading to bed, exhausted. Curtis stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Glad you made it home safely. But Amber wasn't home. Curtis knew exactly where she was. He'd followed her from Romano's to the Fairmont Hotel downtown, watching from across the street as she entered with her lover. The valet had parked her Lexus, the same car that was supposedly broken down in a parking garage. The lies were so brazen, so effortless. How long had this been going on? Curtis opened his laptop and began what he did best: reconnaissance. Years of military intelligence work had taught him how to find information others wanted to keep hidden. He started with the man from the restaurant. It took less than 30 minutes to identify him. The black Amex, the expensive suit, the confident demeanor. Curtis had photographed the man's face clearly. A reverse image search through social media found him. Louis Berg. 46 years old. CEO of Berg & Associates, a venture capital firm specializing in tech startups. Net worth estimated at $45 million. Divorced twice. Known in Silicon Valley circles as a serial womanizer. Curtis dug deeper. Berg & Associates had invested in TechShield VPN solutions 18 months ago, which meant Amber and Louis had likely met through work. The timeline made Curtis's stomach turn. He pulled up Amber's social media, something he rarely checked. There, buried among work posts and dog photos, were subtle signs he'd been too trusting to notice. A photo from a company retreat 6 months ago, where Amber and Louis stood close together, his hand on her shoulder. Comments from Amber's coworkers that suddenly seemed less innocent. "You two look so happy." And "power couple goals." Curtis's phone buzzed. A text from Amber sent 2 hours ago but just now delivered due to spotty hotel Wi-Fi. "Love you. Sleep well." Sent from the Fairmont Hotel at 10:47 p.m. Curtis screenshot everything. The next morning, Curtis woke at 0600 hours, a habit from 25 years of military service. Amber was already up, showered, and dressed in her business casual attire. Tailored slacks and a silk blouse that Curtis had bought her for her birthday. "Morning," she said brightly, kissing his cheek as she grabbed her coffee. "Sorry about last night. That car situation was such a nightmare." "What was wrong with it?" Curtis asked casually, scrambling eggs at the stove. "Battery, I think. Roadside assistance had to jump it." "I might need to take it to the dealership this week." The lie flowed smoothly, practiced. "You should. Can't have you stranded." Curtis plated the eggs and sat across from her at their kitchen island. "How's the big project at work going? The one with the new investor?" Amber's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "It's going well. Why?" "Just curious. You've been working so many late nights lately. Wanted to make sure it's worth the effort." "Definitely worth it. Louis Mr. Berg has been very hands-on with the implementation. He wants to make sure TechShield stays on the cutting edge." Amber met his eyes without flinching. "Should pay off big time for all of us if we hit our targets." Curtis nodded slowly. "I'm sure Mr. Berg is very hands-on." If Amber caught the double meaning, she didn't show it. She finished her breakfast, kissed Curtis goodbye, and headed out the door at 7:30 a.m., like she did every weekday. Curtis waited until her Lexus disappeared down the street before moving into action. He'd spent his entire adult life in military intelligence and operations. If Amber wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. Curtis Hinkle didn't just plan operations, he won them. First stop, his lawyer. Marcus Brecka had been Curtis's attorney since his retirement from the Army. A former JAG officer himself, Marcus understood military discipline and attention to detail. His downtown San Jose office reflected both. Organized, efficient, no nonsense. "Curtis, good to see you," Marcus said, shaking hands firmly. "Though I'm guessing this isn't a social call." Curtis laid out the evidence methodically. The text message, the photos from Romano's, the hotel documentation, Louis Berg's identity and connection to TechShield, Amber's lies about the car. Marcus studied everything with the careful eye of someone who'd prosecuted dozens of military court cases. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on my preliminary research, at least 6 months. Possibly longer." Have you confronted her? No, I'm gathering intelligence first. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair. Curtis, California is a no-fault divorce state. Her affair, while morally reprehensible, won't significantly impact the divorce proceedings unless we can prove she's been using marital assets to fund this relationship or hiding money. What about TechShield stock options? She's been vested for 3 years. Those were granted during the marriage, so they're community property. You'd be entitled to half their value. Marcus pulled up his computer. TechShield just went public last year. Current valuation puts your share at around $2.3 million. Curtis felt no satisfaction at the number. I don't care about the money, Marcus. I care about making sure she doesn't walk away from this thinking betrayal has no consequences. It's not revenge, it's accountability. Curtis's voice carried the steel of command. She lied to me repeatedly, systematically. She's sleeping with her company's investor, which opens up all sorts of potential conflicts of interest. I want to know if she's been sharing confidential information with Berg, using her position to benefit him financially. Anything that crosses ethical or legal lines. Marcus made notes on his legal pad. That would require a forensic investigation of her work accounts, emails, communication logs, which you can subpoena once I file for divorce. True. Marcus set down his pen. Curtis, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Marriages can recover from affairs. Counseling, therapy. Marcus, she texted me that she was stuck in a parking garage while I watched her kiss another man 2 tables away from me. Then she went to a hotel with him and lied about it to my face this morning. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of deliberate deception. Marcus nodded slowly. Understood. I'll start drawing up the divorce papers, but Curtis, if you want to build a case that goes beyond the basic split, you'll need more evidence. Document everything. Keep records of her whereabouts, spending patterns, communication. The more ammunition we have, the better position we're in. Curtis stood, shaking Marcus's hand. I've run intelligence operations in hostile territory, Marcus. I know how to gather evidence. After leaving Marcus's office, Curtis made his second call of the day. Anne-Marie Tammy, a private investigator he'd worked with on security clearance background checks when he'd first started consulting. Anne-Marie was former FBI, sharp as a tack and discreet. They met at a coffee shop in Mountain View, away from San Jose's tech industry hotspots. Lieutenant Hinkle, Anne-Marie said, using his old rank with a smile. Been a while, what can I do for you? Curtis showed her the photos from Romano's and explained the situation. Anne-Marie listened without interruption, her expression professionally neutral. I need to know everything, Curtis said. How long this has been going on. Where they meet? Whether Berg's involved in any questionable business dealings with TechShield? Whether my wife has been compromising her position for this relationship. Anne-Marie pulled out her tablet and began making notes. Louis Berg is a known player in Silicon Valley. This won't be the first time he's mixed business with pleasure. TechShield's a publicly traded company now, which means their filings are public record. If there's anything shady in the Berg & Associates investment, I'll find it. How long will this take? Give me 2 weeks for a preliminary report. Full investigation might take a month, depending on what I find. Anne-Marie looked up from her tablet. Curtis, I have to warn you. Sometimes these investigations uncover things you wish you hadn't learned. Are you prepared for that? Curtis thought about watching Amber kiss Louis Berg, about the effortless way she'd lied about it. I'm prepared for the truth, whatever that is. Good. I'll start immediately. That evening, Curtis returned home to find Amber already there, unusually early. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, something she rarely did anymore, claiming work left her too exhausted to cook. Hey, she said, smiling warmly. Thought I'd make your favorite, beef stroganoff. Curtis felt a chill. This was exactly how she'd acted after previous late nights. Overly attentive, cooking special meals, being affectionate. Classic guilt behavior. What's the occasion? He asked, hanging up his jacket. No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice for my husband. Amber wrapped her arms around him from behind as he stood at the kitchen counter. I know I've been working crazy hours lately. I want to make sure you know how much I appreciate you being so understanding. Understanding? The word felt like a slap. Curtis was understanding, all right. He understood exactly what Amber had been doing during those crazy hours. They ate dinner making small talk about Harvey, about Curtis's consulting work, about nothing that mattered. After dinner, Amber suggested they watch a movie together, curling up against Curtis on the couch, like they used to do when they were first married. Curtis played along, his arm around her shoulders, while his mind worked through operational scenarios. How much evidence would he need? How long should he wait before filing? What was the optimal timing to maximize impact? His phone buzzed with a text from Anne-Marie. Already found something interesting. Call me tomorrow. Curtis deleted the message and pulled Amber closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I love you, he said, the words calculated and deliberate. I love you too, Amber replied, snuggling deeper into his embrace. Both of them were lying. Anne-Marie's preliminary report arrived via encrypted email 2 days later. Curtis read it in his home office while Amber was at work. The findings were worse than he'd imagined. Louis Berg and Amber had been in a relationship for at least 8 months, possibly longer. They'd been careful. No joint credit card charges, no obvious paper trail. But Anne-Marie had found hotel records showing both of them checking into the same hotels on the same dates. Restaurant reservations under Berg's name with notes indicating party of 2, and perhaps most damning flight records showing both of them traveling to a business conference in Miami 6 months ago, staying at the Fontainebleau for 4 days. Curtis remembered that trip. Amber had told him it was a mandatory TechShield security summit. He'd offered to come along, make it a working vacation. She'd insisted it would be all work. Boring sessions about encryption protocols and network security. He'd believed her. But the real gut punch came in the financial analysis. Anne-Marie had found evidence that Berg & Associates' investment in TechShield hadn't been entirely arm's length. Internal company documents, obtained through a source Anne-Marie refused to identify, showed that Amber had been feeding Louis confidential information about TechShield's upcoming product launches, giving Berg & Associates a significant advantage in timing their investment tranches. This wasn't just an affair. This was potential securities fraud. Curtis read through the documentation carefully. Text message metadata showing extensive communication between Amber and Louis, even when they weren't together. Bank records indicating that Amber had opened a separate bank account Curtis didn't know about, with deposits that didn't match her TechShield salary, credit card statements for a card Curtis had never seen, with charges at high-end hotels, restaurants, and boutiques. His wife had been living a completely separate life. Funded by money Curtis couldn't trace. The report concluded with a bombshell. Louis Berg is currently being investigated by the SEC for potential insider trading violations related to 3 tech investments made in the past 2 years. TechShield VPN Solutions is one of the companies under investigation. If your wife has been providing confidential information to Berg, she could be considered a co-conspirator. Curtis sat back in his chair, mind racing through the implications. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. This was about federal crimes, securities violations, potential jail time. He picked up his phone and called Marcus Brecka. Marcus, we need to meet now, and I think we need to bring in someone who specializes in securities law. 2 hours later, Curtis sat in Marcus's conference room with 2 additional lawyers. Bethany Curtis, a securities fraud specialist, and Aaron Lewis, a former federal prosecutor, who now handled white-collar criminal defense. Curtis laid out everything Anne-Marie had found. Both attorneys listened with increasing interest. If half of this is true, Bethany said, your wife could be facing serious federal charges. Insider trading, securities fraud, possibly wire fraud if she was using electronic communications to share confidential information. What kind of sentence are we talking about? Curtis asked. Depends on the amounts involved and how deep her participation goes, but insider trading convictions can carry 20 years in federal prison, plus massive fines. Aaron leaned forward. Curtis, I need to ask you a difficult question. How far do you want to take this? Because if we report this to the SEC, your wife will almost certainly be arrested and prosecuted. This isn't a divorce case anymore. This is criminal. Curtis thought about Amber's face as she'd lied to him about the car. About her laughing with Louis Berg while Curtis sat 2 tables away, invisible and betrayed. About 9 years of marriage built on what he now realized had been a foundation of deception. I want justice, Curtis said quietly. If she broke the law, she should face the consequences. If Louis Berg used his relationship with my wife to commit fraud, he should face consequences too. Marcus cleared his throat. Curtis, think carefully about this. Once we involve federal authorities, there's no taking it back. Amber will know you're the one who reported her. This will destroy any chance of an amicable divorce. There was never going to be an amicable divorce, Marcus. She's been planning her exit strategy for months, funding it with illegal stock tips and a rich lover. Curtis's voice was steady, controlled. I'm just making sure her exit strategy doesn't include walking away with half my assets and no accountability. Bethany made notes on her legal pad. We'll need to coordinate with the SEC investigation that's already ongoing into Berg. If we time this right, we can make sure both of them go down together. How long until we can move? Curtis asked. Give me 2 weeks to coordinate with my contacts at the SEC. They'll want to interview you, review all the evidence. This needs to be airtight. Bethany looked at Curtis seriously. In the meantime, you cannot confront your wife. You cannot let her know you're aware of anything. If she gets spooked and deletes communications or destroys evidence, this whole case could fall apart. Curtis nodded. He'd run covert operations for 2 decades. He knew how to keep a secret. That evening, he came home to find Amber in a panic. She was pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. When she saw Curtis, she quickly ended the call. Everything okay? Curtis asked casually. Fine, just work stuff. Some issues with the quarterly earnings report. Amber forced a smile, but Curtis could see the tension around her eyes. Anything I can help with? No, just boring financial stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Amber's phone buzzed and she glanced at it quickly before silencing it. Curtis had a pretty good idea what work stuff meant. The SEC investigation was heating up, and Louis Berg was likely warning his co-conspirators to be careful, but it was too late for careful. Curtis had already set the dominoes in motion, and when they fell, they would crush everyone in their path. Over the next 2 weeks, Curtis maintained his cover perfectly. He was the devoted husband, supportive and trusting, while secretly meeting with federal investigators to provide evidence of Amber's illegal activities. The SEC agents were particularly interested in the timeline of Berg's investments compared to TechShield's product announcements. Every time Berg and Associates had made a major investment move, it had been preceded by confidential information that only a handful of TechShield employees would have known. And Amber was one of them. Text message metadata showed Amber communicating with Berg hours before major stock movements. Bank records revealed suspicious deposits that coincided with successful Berg and Associates trades. The case was building itself. Curtis provided everything: the photos from Romano's, Anne-Marie's investigative report, financial records, communication logs. The federal prosecutors were building a case that would be nearly impossible to defend. On day 13, Curtis received a call from Bethany Curtis. It's happening tomorrow. The SEC is filing charges against Louis Berg and 3 of his associates. They'll be arresting Amber as a co-conspirator. I wanted to give you a heads up. Curtis felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Just cold, calculated certainty that justice was being served. Where will they arrest her? At her office, probably around 10 a.m. Federal agents will execute search warrants on TechShield's servers and Amber's work accounts simultaneously. Curtis thanked Bethany and hung up. He had one more night of pretending everything was normal. That evening, Amber was unusually quiet during dinner. Her phone kept buzzing, but she ignored it, pushing her food around her plate without eating much. "You okay?" Curtis asked the concerned husband. "Just tired. Long week." Amber looked up at him, and for a moment, Curtis thought he saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. "Curtis, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If I had made a terrible mistake, something that couldn't be undone, would you forgive me?" Curtis held his wife's gaze, wondering if she was about to confess everything. "That depends on the mistake." Amber looked away. "Never mind, I'm just being dramatic. Too much stress at work." "Amber, if something's wrong, you can tell me. We're partners, remember? We face things together." Amber's eyes filled with tears. "I know, I just need to get through tomorrow. Then maybe we can talk." But tomorrow, Amber wouldn't be talking to Curtis. She'd be talking to federal investigators while sitting in a jail cell. Curtis squeezed her hand across the dinner table, the gesture hollow and mechanical. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it." Amber nodded, wiping her eyes. "I love you, Curtis." "I love you too," Curtis lied. That night, Curtis couldn't sleep. He lay next to Amber, listening to her breathing, knowing that by this time tomorrow their marriage would be over, her career destroyed, her freedom gone. He thought about the text message from 2 weeks ago. Car stuck in parking garage. Love you. He thought about watching her kiss Louis Berg while claiming to be stranded. He thought about 9 years of marriage that had apparently meant nothing to her. Curtis had served his country for 25 years, putting his life on the line to protect people who would never know his name. He'd followed orders, maintained discipline, done his duty without complaint. But Amber had taken his trust, his loyalty, his love, and used them as tools for her own benefit while destroying everything they'd built together. Tomorrow, she would learn that Lieutenant Curtis Hinkle didn't forgive, didn't forget, and never left an enemy standing. Tomorrow, the dominoes would start to fall. Curtis woke at 05:30 hours, a full hour before Amber's alarm. He showered, dressed in his best suit, the one he wore for military memorial services, and made coffee. By the time Amber stumbled into the kitchen at 06:45, Curtis was sitting at the island reading the Wall Street Journal online. "You're up early," Amber said, yawning. "Big meeting today?" "Something like that." Curtis looked up from his tablet. "Coffee's fresh." Amber poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter, checking her phone. Curtis watched her face change as she read something that made her freeze. "Everything okay?" he asked innocuously. I need to go, now." Amber set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "There's an emergency at work." "At 6:50 in the morning?" "Yes, I'm sorry, I have to—" Amber grabbed her purse and keys, nearly running for the door. Curtis let her go. He knew exactly what the emergency was. Louis Berg had been arrested at his home at 0600 hours, and word was spreading fast through their network. Amber was trying to get ahead of the situation, probably to delete incriminating evidence or coordinate stories with her co-conspirators. It wouldn't matter. The federal agents had already seized everything they needed. Curtis waited until just 900 before driving to TechShield's offices in North San Jose. He parked across the street, in a position where he could see the main entrance. At exactly 0955, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of the building. Federal agents in windbreakers marked FBI and SEC emerged and entered the building in a coordinated formation. Curtis checked his watch. 1,000 hours, right on schedule. He didn't need to go inside to know what was happening. Amber was being arrested at her desk, probably in front of her colleagues. Federal agents were boxing up computers, files, and evidence. TechShield's executives were scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus Brecka. It's done. Your wife was arrested at 10:02. They're charging her with conspiracy to commit securities fraud, insider trading, and wire fraud. Bail hearing is tomorrow. Curtis responded, "Thank you. Proceeding with divorce filing?" "Already filed. She'll be served as soon as she's processed." Curtis put his phone away and drove home. The house felt different now, emptier, cleaner, like a burden had been lifted. He'd been carrying the weight of Amber's deception for 2 weeks, and now that burden was someone else's problem. His phone rang, an unknown number. Curtis Hinkle. Mr. Hinkle, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Bethany Curtis. I wanted to inform you personally that your wife has been formally charged with multiple federal crimes. The arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. in federal court. You're welcome to attend if you wish. I'll be there. I also wanted to thank you for your cooperation with this investigation. Your evidence was instrumental in building this case. Curtis felt no pride in that statement. I just want justice served. It will be. Mr. Berg is also being arraigned tomorrow on multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. We're estimating both he and your wife are facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison if convicted. After the call ended, Curtis sat in his home office, the same office where he'd first discovered the extent of Amber's betrayal. The same office where he'd planned this entire operation with military precision. His phone rang again. This time it was Amber calling from a jail phone. Curtis answered. Hello? Curtis, oh my God, Curtis, you have to help me. Amber's voice was hysterical, broken. They arrested me. They're saying I helped Lewis with insider trading. This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. You have to tell them you believe me. You have to get me out of here. Curtis let her speak for a full minute before responding, his voice calm and measured. Amber, I know everything. Silence on the line. I know about you and Lewis Berg. I've known for 2 weeks. I know about the hotels, the trips, the money. I know you've been feeding him confidential information from TechShield. I know about the separate bank account, the credit card I never saw. I know about Romano's restaurant on that Tuesday night 3 weeks ago when you texted me about your car being stuck in a parking garage. Curtis, I was there, Amber. 2 tables away from you. I watched you kiss him. I watched you lie to me through text message. I watched you come home and lie to my face. Amber was crying now, deep, wrenching sobs. Please, please, I'm so sorry. I made terrible mistakes. But you can't let them destroy my life over this. Please, Curtis, I'm your wife. You were my wife. I filed for divorce this morning. You'll be served papers tomorrow. No, no, no. Curtis, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Lewis. I'll never lie to you again. Please don't abandon me now. Curtis thought about 9 years of marriage, about trust given and systematically destroyed, about sitting 2 tables away, invisible, while his wife kissed another man and texted him lies. You made your choice, Amber. Now you live with the consequences. What about the house? My stock options? Curtis, if I go to prison, I'll lose everything. Yes, you will. That's what happens when you commit federal crimes. You did this. Amber's voice shifted from pleading to angry. You reported me. You gave them evidence. You destroyed my life. No, Amber. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure you didn't take me down with you. Curtis hung up before she could respond. He sat in silence for several minutes, processing the finality of what he'd just done. 25 years in the military had prepared him for making hard decisions, but this felt different. This was personal in a way combat had never been. His phone buzzed with a text from Anne-Marie Tammy. Saw the news about TechShield arrests. Well done, Lieutenant. Another text from Marcus Brecca. Amber's public defender is requesting bail reduction. Prosecutor is opposing. Judge will decide tomorrow. Curtis forwarded both messages to his private email folder labeled Operation Accountability and closed his laptop. Harvey padded into the office and laid his head on Curtis's lap, sensing his owner's emotional state. Curtis scratched behind the dog's ears, finding comfort in the simple loyalty of an animal who would never betray him. That evening, Curtis made dinner for himself, a simple grilled chicken and salad, and ate alone in the dining room where he and Amber had shared hundreds of meals over 9 years. The silence was profound but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of truth, of deception ended, of justice beginning its inexorable march. His phone rang one final time that day. Jane Collins, his sister in Denver. "Curtis, I just saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Jane." "You should have called me. I would have come down, helped you through this." "I needed to handle it myself." Jane was quiet for a moment. "Did you really not know she was cheating until 3 weeks ago?" "I didn't know until I was sitting 2 tables away from her at Romano's, watching her kiss another man while she texted me lies about being stranded." "God, Curtis, that's brutal." "Yes, it was." "Are you sure about pressing charges? I mean, I know she cheated, but federal prison. That's a heavy price." Curtis looked at the empty chair where Amber used to sit, where she'd eaten dinner and made small talk and pretended to be a faithful wife while secretly destroying everything they'd built together. She used confidential information to help her lover make millions through illegal stock trades, Jane. This isn't about the affair. This is about federal crimes that harmed innocent investors who trusted TechShield stock would be traded fairly. I know. It just seems like such a complete destruction of her life." "She destroyed her own life. I just made sure she was held accountable for it." After hanging up with Jane, Curtis poured himself a glass of scotch, the good bottle he'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat in his garage, surrounded by the tools and equipment he'd accumulated over 9 years of civilian life. Tomorrow, he would attend Amber's arraignment. He would watch her stand before a federal judge and hear the charges read against her. He would watch her beg for bail reduction, watch her public defender argue she wasn't a flight risk, watch the prosecutor detail the evidence of her systematic crimes. And Curtis would feel no satisfaction, no vindication, no triumph. He would feel only the cold certainty that justice, however painful, was being served. Lieutenant Curtis Hinkle had spent 25 years defending his country against enemies foreign and domestic. He'd never imagined the most devastating enemy would be sleeping in his bed, eating at his table, sharing his life while plotting his destruction. But he'd dealt with that enemy the same way he'd dealt with every other threat he'd faced in his military career. With discipline, precision, and absolute commitment to mission accomplishment. Mission accomplished. The federal courtroom was packed for Amber and Lewis's arraignment. Curtis sat in the back, wearing sunglasses despite being indoors, not wanting to be recognized by the media covering the case. TechShield's insider trading scandal was front-page news. Silicon Valley corruption, romance gone wrong, millions in illegal profits. The reporters were having a field day. At 13 to 55 hours, federal marshals led Amber into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. Curtis barely recognized her. Her hair was unwashed, her face pale and drawn without makeup. She looked 10 years older than she had 2 weeks ago. Lewisburg entered separately, looking equally diminished. The confident CEO who'd kissed Curtis's wife at Romano's was gone, replaced by a frightened man facing decades in prison. Judge Margaret Rawlins presided, a stern woman in her late 60s with a reputation for harsh sentences in white-collar crime cases. She reviewed the charges with cold efficiency. "Miss Amber Hinkle, you are charged with conspiracy to commit securities fraud, insider trading violations, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. Mr. Lewisburg, you face identical charges plus money laundering. How do you plead?" Both defendants pleaded not guilty, their lawyers already positioning for plea negotiations. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Bethany Curtis, argued against bail with devastating effectiveness. "Your Honor, the defendants engaged in a systematic scheme to defraud investors over an 8-month period, generating over $12 million in illegal profits. Ms. Dahlweiner, Hinkle betrayed her position of trust at TechShield VPN Solutions, providing confidential information to her co-conspirator and lover, Mr. Berg, who then used that information to manipulate stock prices for personal gain. They have significant financial resources, international connections, and every motivation to flee. The United States requests both defendants be held without bail pending trial. Amber's public defender, a young woman named Sarah Ann Marie, argued for home confinement with electronic monitoring. Your Honor, Ms. Hinkle has no prior criminal record. She's a respected cybersecurity professional with deep roots in the community. She's not a flight risk and deserves the opportunity to prepare her defense outside of federal custody. Judge Rollins wasn't swayed. Both defendants are remanded to federal custody without bail. Trial is set for 8 weeks from today. We're adjourned. Curtis watched Amber's face crumble as the marshals led her away. She looked directly at him for the first time, their eyes meeting across the crowded courtroom. Curtis saw everything in that look: betrayal, anger, desperation, regret. He felt nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the attorneys. Curtis slipped out a side door and drove home, where Marcus Brecka was waiting with divorce papers requiring immediate attention. The divorce filing is public record now, Marcus said, spreading documents across Curtis's kitchen table. Media will probably connect the dots and show up at your door soon. I'd recommend you prepare a statement. No statement. This is private family business. Curtis, your wife is front-page news for the biggest insider trading scandal in Silicon Valley history. Nothing about this is private anymore. Curtis signed the divorce papers with methodical precision. Then they'll have to write their stories without my cooperation. Over the next 2 weeks, Curtis watched his life become a media circus. Reporters camped outside his house. News helicopters circled overhead. Online articles dissected his marriage, speculating about how much he'd known, when he'd known it, whether he'd participated in Amber's crimes. Through it all, Curtis said nothing. He went to his consulting meetings, walked Harvey, maintained his routine with military discipline. When reporters shouted questions, he ignored them. When his phone rang with requests for interviews, he deleted the messages. His silence drove them crazy. But Curtis understood that silence was its own form of power. Let them speculate. Let them write their theories. The truth would come out in court. 6 weeks after Amber's arrest, Marcus called with unexpected news. Amber's attorney wants to discuss a plea agreement. They're willing to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Louis Berg. What kind of sentence reduction are they looking at? Prosecution is offering 8 to 10 years instead of 15 to 20. She'd be eligible for parole in 6 years with good behavior. Curtis considered this. 8 years meant Amber would be 49 when released. Still young enough to rebuild a life, but old enough to have lost everything she'd valued: her career, her reputation, her freedom. What do they want from me? They're asking if you'd be willing to provide a character letter supporting leniency. They think it would help with the judge. Curtis laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. They want me to help the woman who systematically destroyed our marriage and committed federal crimes? What exactly would I say in this letter? That's your decision. But Curtis, I should tell you, if she takes this plea, she'll have to testify against Berg at his trial. That means details of their affair will become public record. All of it. The hotels, the trips, the intimate communications. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for the truth to come out, whatever that truth is. And Emily? Marcus's use of a hypothetical daughter's name gave Curtis pause. If you two had kids, this would be devastating for them. Having their mother's affair detailed in open court, hearing the sordid details of her betrayal. But Curtis and Amber had no children. That was one small mercy in this disaster. No innocent kids to be traumatized by their parents' failures. Tell them I won't provide a character letter, but I won't oppose their plea negotiations either. If Amber wants leniency, she'll have to earn it through full cooperation with the prosecution. Understood. A week later, Amber accepted the plea agreement. She would testify against Louis Berg at his trial in exchange for an 8-year sentence. The news made headlines. TechShield insider turns on lover in plea deal. Curtis read the articles with detached interest. The media portrayed Amber as a tragic figure manipulated by a powerful man, sacrificing her freedom to expose corruption. They left out the part where she'd lied to her husband's face for months, stolen confidential information, and helped generate millions in illegal profits. But Curtis knew the full truth would come out at Berg's trial, and he intended to be there for every day of it. Louis Berg's trial began on a cold December morning, exactly 3 months after Curtis had watched his wife kiss another man at Romano's restaurant. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Day 1. Financial experts testified about the unusual trading patterns in TechShield stock, how Berg and Associates investments had consistently preceded major company announcements by mere hours or days. Day 2. FBI agents detailed the electronic communications between Amber and Louis, showing a clear pattern of confidential information being shared and immediately acted upon. Day 3. SEC investigators explained how Berg had made over $12 million in illegal profits from trades based on information only Amber could have provided. And on Day 4, Amber took the stand. Curtis sat in the courtroom gallery watching his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, testify under oath about her crimes. She wore a conservative blue suit, her hair neatly styled, looking nothing like the broken woman from her arraignment. The prosecutor led her through the timeline methodically. How she'd met Louis Berg 18 months ago at a TechShield investor meeting. How their professional relationship had become personal. How Berg had gradually convinced her to share information about upcoming product launches, security protocols, and strategic plans. Ms. Hinkle, when did this relationship become romantic? Amber's voice was steady, rehearsed. About 8 months ago, we had been working closely on investment strategies and feelings developed. Were you married at the time? Yes, to Curtis Hinkle, my husband of 9 years. Did your husband know about your relationship with Mr. Berg? No, I kept it secret from him. The prosecutor pulled up exhibits on the courtroom screens. Text messages, hotel receipts, flight records. Each one a knife twisting in the wound of Curtis's betrayal. Ms. Hinkle, this text message from March 15th shows you sending Mr. Berg confidential information about TechShield's upcoming security patch release. This was 2 days before the public announcement. Did you understand this information was confidential? Yes. And did you know Mr. Berg was using this information to trade TechShield stock? Amber hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Why did you provide this information? Because Amber's voice cracked slightly. Because Louis asked me to, and I thought I was in love with him. I thought we had a future together. I thought if I helped him be successful, we could build a life. At your husband's expense? I wasn't thinking about Curtis. I wasn't thinking clearly about anything except what Louis and I had together. On cross-examination, Berg's defense attorney tried to paint Amber as the manipulator, the seductress who had trapped his client in her schemes. But the evidence was too strong. The communications showed clearly that Berg had initiated the request for information, had structured the trades, had profited from the illegal activity. After 3 days of testimony, the jury took less than 4 hours to convict Louis Berg on all counts. Judge Rollins sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $12 million in restitution plus fines. Amber's sentencing came 2 weeks later. Curtis attended that hearing too, sitting in the same back row seat he'd occupied throughout the trial. Judge Rollins reviewed Amber's cooperation, her lack of prior criminal record, and the destruction she'd caused to innocent investors who had trusted TechShield stock would be traded fairly. Ms. Hinkle, you betrayed your employer, your profession, and your marriage. You used your position of trust to enrich yourself and your lover at the expense of innocent investors. While I acknowledge your cooperation with prosecutors, I cannot ignore the systematic and deliberate nature of your crimes. I hereby sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. Amber sobbed as the marshals led her away. Curtis watched impassively, feeling none of the emotions he'd expected. No satisfaction, no vindication, no closure. Just emptiness. Outside the courthouse, a reporter finally cornered Curtis before he could escape to his car. "Mr. Hinkle, can you comment on your wife's sentence? Do you feel justice was served?" Curtis looked directly into the camera, speaking publicly for the first time since this nightmare began. "My wife made choices that destroyed our marriage, violated the law, and harmed innocent people. The legal system has held her accountable for those choices. That's all I have to say." He drove home to an empty house, poured himself a drink, and sat in his garage, the place where he'd first processed the betrayal, where he'd planned his response, where he'd executed his operation with military precision. Justice had been served. Amber would spend the next 8 years in federal prison. Louis Berg would spend 2 decades behind bars. The illegal profits had been forfeited. TechShield had cleaned house and implemented new security protocols. But Curtis felt no triumph in any of it. He'd won the war, but the victory felt hollow. 9 years of marriage destroyed by lies. A partner he'd trusted completely, revealed as a calculating criminal. A future he'd envisioned, erased by betrayal. Lieutenant Curtis Hinkle had fought enemies on battlefields around the world. But nothing had prepared him for the devastation of discovering the enemy was sleeping in his bed, eating at his table, wearing his grandmother's ring while planning his destruction. He'd done what he had to do, gathered evidence, built a case, ensured justice was served. But as he sat alone in his garage that evening, surrounded by the tools and memories of a life he'd thought was real, Curtis realized something profound. You can win the war and still lose everything that matters. 6 months after Amber's sentencing, Curtis stood in his garage for the last time, packing the last of his tools into moving boxes. The house sale had closed that morning. A young tech couple had bought it for $2.3 million, excited about the schools and neighborhood, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded within these walls. Curtis was moving to Montana, to a small cabin near Glacier National Park. Far from Silicon Valley, far from courtrooms and reporters, far from the ghosts of his failed marriage. Harvey sat nearby, watching with the patient attention only dogs possess. The golden retriever had been Curtis's constant companion through the nightmare, never judging, never demanding more than food and walks and the occasional ear scratch. "Ready for an adventure, boy?" Curtis asked, scratching Harvey's head. Harvey's tail thumped against the concrete floor. Curtis's phone rang. Marcus Brecka, calling with final divorce papers to sign. "It's official," Marcus said when Curtis answered. "Judge signed the final decree this morning. You're officially divorced." "How much of the stock options did she end up with?" "None. Since they were earned through illegal activity, the court ordered them forfeited entirely. You get the house sale proceeds, minus her share of the mortgage payments." "She gets nothing." Curtis felt no satisfaction in this financial victory. He'd never cared about the money. He'd cared about the betrayal, the lies, the systematic destruction of trust. "What about her appeal?" "Denied. She'll serve the full 8 years unless she gets early release for good behavior. Earliest she could be out is 2031. Curtis did the math. Amber would be 49 years old, her career destroyed, her reputation ruined, her future uncertain. But she'd be free eventually. She'd have a chance to rebuild, start over, find whatever peace was possible after federal prison. It was more than she deserved, but Curtis had never been the type to seek vengeance beyond justice. "Thanks for everything, Marcus. Send the final papers to my Montana address." "You sure about this move? Seems like running away." Curtis looked around his empty garage, remembering the night he'd sat here after watching Amber kiss Louis Berg, planning his response with military precision. "It's not running away, Marcus. It's strategic repositioning to more favorable terrain." Marcus chuckled. "Once a soldier, always a soldier. Take care of yourself, Curtis." After hanging up, Curtis loaded the last boxes into his truck. a new Ford F-150 he'd bought specifically for Montana winters. Harvey jumped into the passenger seat, ready for the journey. Curtis took one final walk through the empty house. The kitchen where Amber had lied about her car trouble. The living room where they'd watched movies together, her head on his shoulder. The bedroom where he'd lain awake, listening to her breathe, not knowing she'd spent the evening with another man. Every room held ghosts of the life he'd thought was real, but Curtis had learned in 25 years of military service that you couldn't change the past. You could only control your response to it, learn from it, and move forward with the lessons it taught. He locked the front door for the last time and climbed into his truck. Harvey settled beside him, content and unquestioning. Curtis programmed his GPS for Montana and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. The drive took 3 days. Curtis stopped at cheap motels, ate at roadside diners, and watched the landscape change from Silicon Valley tech campuses to agricultural flatlands to mountain wilderness. With each mile, he felt the weight of the past year lifting gradually. The cabin in Montana was exactly what Curtis needed. Isolated, simple, surrounded by forest and mountains. No neighbors to ask questions, no reporters to ambush him, no memories of Amber around every corner. He spent his first week setting up the cabin, building shelves, organizing his tools, creating a space that was entirely his own. Harvey explored the surrounding forest with unbridled joy, chasing squirrels and swimming in the cold creek that ran behind the property. Curtis fell into a routine. Early morning hikes with Harvey, consulting work on his laptop. He'd kept his defense contractor clients working remotely now. Afternoons spent fishing or reading. Evenings watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. 3 months after moving to Montana, Curtis received a letter from Amber. The prison had forwarded it to his new address, which meant his lawyer had provided her with the information. Curtis stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Part of him wanted to throw it away unread, to maintain the distance he'd worked so hard to create. But another part, the part that had been married to this woman for 9 years, needed to know what she had to say. The letter was 5 pages, handwritten on prison stationery. Curtis, I know I have no right to write to you. I know I destroyed everything good between us, but I need you to know some things, even if you never respond. First, I'm sorry. I know those words are inadequate for what I did, but they're all I have. I'm sorry for betraying you, for lying to you, for throwing away 9 years of marriage for a fantasy that was never real. Second, you were right to turn me in. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I understand now that what Lewis and I did wasn't just immoral, it was criminal. We hurt innocent people. We broke laws that exist for good reasons. I deserve to be caught and punished. Third, I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You were a good husband. You were loyal and supportive and trustworthy. My affair had nothing to do with any failing on your part. It was entirely my own weakness, my own selfishness, my own moral bankruptcy. The text message you mentioned about my car being stuck, I think about that moment every day. How I was sitting 2 tables away from you, kissing Lewis while sending you lies. How I thought I was so clever, so sophisticated, so good at managing my double life. How I didn't realize my own husband was watching me destroy us both. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even hope for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I lost. Not the money or the career or the freedom. I understand that I lost the best person who ever loved me. Prison is hard, Curtis. Harder than I imagined. But it's also clarifying. I see now what matters and what doesn't. I see how much I took for granted. I see how thoroughly I destroyed something irreplaceable. When I get out in 8 years, I'll be almost 50 years old. I'll have no career, no money, no connections. I'll be a middle-aged ex-convict trying to rebuild a life from nothing. I accept that. It's what I deserve. But I hope, and this is the hardest thing to write, I hope that you've found peace. I hope Montana is everything you need it to be. I hope you've been able to move past the pain I caused and build a new life that's better than what we had. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I know you won't write back. I know you've moved on. But I needed to say these things, even if you throw this letter away without finishing it. Take care of yourself, Curtis. Take care of Harvey. Live the life I prevented us from having together. I'm sorry. Amber Curtis read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer with his divorce papers and other documents from that chapter of his life. He felt no urge to respond. Amber was right. He had moved on. The pain had faded to a dull ache. The anger transformed into something like acceptance. She would serve her time, pay her debt to society, and hopefully learn from her mistakes. But Curtis would never forgive her. Some betrayals were too fundamental, too complete to ever be repaired. He poured himself a scotch and sat on his cabin's porch, Harvey at his feet, watching the sun set over the Montana mountains. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, nature's daily reminder that beauty existed even after destruction. Curtis thought about the text message that had started everything. Car stuck in parking garage. Love you. He thought about sitting 2 tables away at Romano's, invisible to the woman he'd trusted completely. He thought about the systematic way he'd gathered evidence, built a case, and ensured justice was served.